This is a statue outside of Lincoln Financial Field, home of the Philadelphia Eagles. If you're a football fan, you know why this is here, but if you don't, let me jog your memory.
And they're going to snap it, and it's Trey Burton who throws caught. Foles, touchdown.
But for the man responsible, Nick Foles, this play was never supposed to happen. You see, the career that he knew wasn't ever about the glory of catching Super Bowl touchdown passes or cementing a legacy in NFL history, not even close. For Foles to hit those highest of highs, he'd first have to overcome rock bottom and face his fears of failure head on after being kicked down so much that he was ready to leave football forever. So how did Nick Foles go from washed up to Philadelphia legend? To get our answer, let's head back to before he'd ever read an NFL defense. After having considerable success in the college level with a poor Arizona team and lighting stat sheets on fire for his whole senior season, Nick Foles was ready to advance to the next level. Heading into the draft, as a 6'6" pocket passer, the biggest knock on him was his lack of mobility, and scouts were concerned that his seemingly non-apparent athleticism would limit him in the NFL. I guess that tends to be a point of focus when RG3 is one of the top prospects in your draft class. Nevertheless, Foles' deep ball and quick decision-making would give him a seat at the table, and the Eagles would select him in the third round of the 2012 draft as the 7th quarterback off the board. But what he never expected, though, was that the career ahead of him in the big leagues was about to play out a lot more like a soap opera than anything else. After a rookie year of playing behind Michael Vick, who struggled with injury issues, Foles went into year 2 as a backup. In the preseason, new head coach Chip Kelly had a decision to make on what the identity of his team would be. And for clarity on how different Mike Vick and Nick Foles were in terms of being quarterbacks, in that year's Madden, their speed ratings were 92 and 57. I'll let you guess which one's which. The decision would be made to start the man with 92 speed. Nevertheless, that wouldn't matter much anyways, as a hamstring injury in week 2 would sideline Vick and give Foles an opportunity to take the reins. And take them he did. In a Pro Bowl caliber season, Nick Foles would throw for nearly 2,900 yards with 27 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions, highlighted by a game where he threw 7 touchdown passes, tying the NFL record for most in a single game. He'd lead the Eagles into the playoffs for the first time since 2010, though they'd exit in the first round against Drew Brees' Saints, who incidentally went to the same high school as Nick Foles, granted it was a decade earlier. After flying high, the 2014 season would be a very different story for Foles, and after struggling in the first few weeks, his year would be brought to an end in week 9 with a broken collarbone, leaving him with a 13-10 touchdown to interception ratio on the season. Definitely a little bit of a step down from 27-2 the year prior. Turns out Chip Kelly wasn't a fan of this mortal version of Foles, and in March of that following year, Nick Foles received a phone call from his head coach that he was being traded to the St. Louis Rams for Sam Bradford, a move that shocked the entire league. Once Foles arrived in St. Louis, his struggles didn't seem to get any better, and after throwing 7 touchdowns in a single game 2 years prior, he'd throw for 7 on the entire season. He would be benched later in the year for Case Keenum, and after less than a season, the organization had already seen enough. In the year's next draft, they'd select Jared Goff number 1 overall, and after seeing that the team was moving on from him, Foles requested release that offseason. At this point in his career, Nick Foles felt like his best football days were already behind him, and he felt perfectly at peace with the thought of never taking another snap in the NFL. He didn't pick up a football for months, and was totally ready to move on. But after a long and emotional conversation with his wife about how he'd fallen out of love with the game, he quickly had a change of heart. He called up Andy Reid, the coach who drafted him, who was now head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. Brought back to football as a backup quarterback, Foles' time would be cut short in Kansas City, as over in Philadelphia, big changes were taking place. And by big changes, I mean trying to erase all the damage that the Chip Kelly era had left in its wake. With new coach Doug Peterson at the helm, accompanied by rookie quarterback Carson Wentz, the Eagles brought back Foles in 2017 to serve in yet another backup role. With Foles on the sidelines mentoring the young QB, Wentz took a massive step in his second year and quickly found himself in MVP conversation as he led the Eagles to an 11-2 record through their first 13 games. Everyone in the city of brotherly love put their faith in Wentz, and the team had an aura of swagger everywhere they went on both sides of the ball. The foundation of a run deep into the postseason was beginning to firm up. But in week 14, as the team was fighting to lock up home field in a first-round bye, this play happened.
Rolling, he's gonna run.
When he got into the end zone, he took a big shot.
Carson Wentz, who was one of the most electrifying players in the league and the heart and soul of the Eagles, had just torn his ACL. All eyes were now on Nick Foles, who many remembered as a one-year wonder from a few years back. And the media, they wasted no time in immediately writing the Eagles off in Wentz's absence.
I think every team that makes the playoffs in the NFC has a better shot of making the Super Bowl than your number 1 seed Philadelphia Eagles.
But nothing was certain yet, and now Nick Foles is at the helm of the NFC East's powerhouse. Late in the season, struggles from Foles cast even more doubt onto the Eagles, turning them from powerhouse to underdog in a matter of a few weeks. But if there's one thing to know about Philadelphia, it's that underdog victories are what they know and love. The coaching staff of the Eagles, led by Frank Reich and Doug Peterson, knew the offense would need to change if they were going to have any success in the postseason. So they looked back to Foles' success in the Chip Kelly scheme and began to coach Nick back into that style focused on the run-pass option and taking advantage of his knack for getting the ball out quickly. With this coaching change, after having struggled to complete 50% of his passes in December, the playoffs would tell a totally different story. Foles would overcome struggles early against the Falcons in the divisional round to finish with a 77% completion rate, winning the game 15-10 despite the team's billing as an underdog. They'd ride with the tag, entering in the NFC Championship embracing the label. The whole team's swagger led into a 38-7 obliteration of the Vikings, who were led by Case Keenum, the man who'd taken Nick Foles' job back with the Rams. The stage was now set for the Super Bowl, in a matchup that nearly everyone had pretty much already handed to the Patriots. The Eagles were a great story and all, and Nick Foles had a great run, but come on, it's the Patriots. But what happened next would cement Foles as a Philly sports legend. In a shootout, Foles and the Eagles' offense fielded everything thrown at them and then some. And after Foles had been unable to connect on any passes of more than 20 yards as a starter that year, he went 4 of 8 on deep balls with 2 touchdowns when it mattered the absolute most. The Eagles were underdogs no more, outlasting one of Tom Brady's greatest performances ever to overcome the Pats 41-33. With 373 yards and 4 total touchdowns, Foles would be named Super Bowl MVP with his redemption story complete. With the franchise's first Super Bowl win now secured, Philadelphia would destroy the city in Nick Foles' honor. But with his legend already being whispered to small children, Foles would return to second string on the depth chart in 2019, as Wentz was still the franchise quarterback and no team was willing to pay up to trade for the Super Bowl MVP. But the story of St. Nick isn't finished just yet, because for some reason, Nick Foles' career has been written more like a movie script than anything else, and unfortunately Carson Wentz would go down with another injury late in the 2018 season, giving Foles another shot at leading the Eagles to postseason glory. But this wasn't nearly the same situation, or the same Eagles roster that won the Super Bowl the year before, sitting at 6-7 and crippled by injuries on both sides of the ball. After stalling out in multiple games, it looked like the defending champs might not even make it to the postseason at all. But the return of Foles as a starter sparked something on the team, and players began putting up performances that hadn't been seen in many weeks. Foles was magic to the Eagles, and the team was ready to do it all again, going on a 3-0 run to close out the season against multiple future playoff teams to secure a spot in the playoffs. In the wildcard round, Foles would look past a mostly average performance against the vaunted Chicago Bears defense on his final drive, and would march 60 yards down the field in the waning minutes of the game before throwing a go-ahead touchdown to Golden Tate. The legend would continue on, because, well, take it away, Chris.
Oh my goodness, the Bears season's going to end on a double doink.
Next up on the docket were the New Orleans Saints, who had absolutely crushed the Eagles in the Superdome 48-7 in Week 11, and once again Nick Foles was matched up against Drew Brees, 2 NFL quarterbacks from the same high school. And as he does in the playoffs, Foles would give the Saints a run for their money, as with just 2 minutes remaining in a 20-14 game, Foles had the Eagles just 27 yards away from continuing the fairy tale story of the NFL's biggest underdogs. But this time, it wasn't meant to be, as Alshon Jeffrey's first ever playoff drop would result in an interception that would end the Eagles' magical 4-game playoff win streak with Foles. And with that game now in the books, it's very likely that Nick Foles will never play another game in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform. But even if that is how it all ends, the fans will never forget what he did for the organization, with many tributes and thank yous rolling in for the quarterback who became a star only because he wasn't supposed to be. So what's next for Nick Foles? Well, as of recording this video, it doesn't look like the Eagles are going to tag him this offseason, so it looks like he'll be free to sign with any team in 2019. The situation for where he'll actually end up is a little bit more complicated though, since teams that are in need of quarterbacks all seem to have possible routes that don't involve going after a player in free agency. With that said, at least in my eyes, the Jacksonville Jaguars is the only place that really makes perfect sense to me, but they have their own contract issues to deal with, so I guess we'll just have to see how things play out.
Shut up. Know the rules.
Regardless of where Foles ends up signing this offseason or how he plays in the future, we know that one thing is for certain. As the first Super Bowl winning quarterback in franchise history for the Philadelphia Eagles, Nick Foles' legacy is already set in stone.